A terrified 11-year-old girl screamed for help at a rural gas station in Montana, claiming the man dragging her toward a van wasn't her father. Travelers looked away. The clerk hesitated, but one man didn't ignore her, a scarred biker named Clay Mercer, who'd spent 15 years riding alone, haunted by a promise he'd failed to keep long ago. When Clay stepped between the girl and the stranger, he saw something in her eyes that reminded him of his own daughter, the one he couldn't save. The man claimed to be her stepfather. He had documents. He seemed credible. But the girl's fear was real, and Clay had learned to trust his instincts over paperwork. What began as a roadside intervention became a race against time when Clay discovered the girl, Emma, had been taken from her dying mother 3 states away by a man with connections to corrupt officials. With no badge, no authority, and a past that made law enforcement distrust him, Clay made a call he hadn't made in over a decade, to the brothers he rode with before everything fell apart. By sunrise, 97 motorcycles lined the highway outside that gas station. They came from 3 states, answering a promise they'd made to each other years ago. When one calls, all come. Together, they would uncover a network of falsified custody documents, bribed social workers, and a man who'd been doing this for years, always choosing children whose mothers were too sick, too poor, or too alone to fight back. This is a story about the promise Clay made to his daughter before she died, about the Brotherhood that never forgot him, even when he forgot himself, about a little girl who refused to stop screaming until someone finally listened, and about the moment when 97 engines roared to life, not for war, but for justice that the system had failed to deliver. Because sometimes the law looks the other way, but a promise never does. If you enjoy this story, please leave a comment below telling us where you're watching from. Clay Mercer hadn't stopped for gas in 3 hours, but the reserve light had been glowing amber for the last 20 miles, and the next station was another 40 out. The Montana sun hung low and angry over the plains, turning the asphalt into ribbons of heat that shimmered like water that would never quench anything. He pulled his 09 Softail into the gravel lot of a place called Milton's Stop and Go, a sagging structure with 2 pumps, a flickering neon sign, and bars on the windows, the kind of place where people didn't ask questions and didn't offer answers. Clay cut the engine. Silence flooded in, the kind that felt like pressure in the ears. He'd been riding for 6 days straight, going nowhere in particular, which was the only direction that made sense anymore. 15 years since he'd buried his daughter. 15 years since he'd felt anything that wasn't the vibration of a throttle under his palm or the burn of whiskey going down. He swung off the bike and stretched, vertebrae popping like knuckles. His leather cut was faded, patches worn thin, the back still carrying the emblem of a club he no longer rode with. Iron Oath MC. He hadn't spoken to any of them since the funeral, hadn't wanted to. Grief had a way of making a man into an island, and Clay had let the water rise until no bridge could reach him anymore. The gas nozzle clicked into the tank, and he leaned against the bike, eyes half closed against the glare. That's when he heard it. A scream. Not the playful kind, not the dramatic tantrum of a kid who didn't get candy. This was raw, desperate, the kind of sound that carved itself into the air and refused to fade. Clay's eyes snapped open. Across the lot, near a white cargo van with tinted windows, a girl, maybe 11, dark hair in a ponytail, was pulling back against a man's grip. He was thick-shouldered, clean-shaven, wearing khakis and a polo shirt like he'd just come from a church picnic. He had her wrist locked in his hand, dragging her toward the van's open side door. "Let go of me," she screamed. "He's not my dad. Someone help me." 2 other cars were parked nearby. A couple loading groceries into an SUV glanced over, then looked away. A trucker walking toward the restroom slowed, hesitated, then kept moving. The clerk inside the station stared through the window, but didn't come out. The man tightened his grip. Emma, stop making a scene. We talked about this. I don't know you. Her voice cracked. Please, somebody. Clay's hand was already off the pump. He crossed the lot in 6 strides, boots crunching gravel, and stopped 3 feet from the man, close enough to make it clear this wasn't a polite inquiry. She says you're not her father, Clay said. His voice was low, even, the kind of calm that came from too many years of choosing words carefully. The man's eyes flicked over Clay, the cut, the scars on his knuckles, the way he stood like a man who'd been in 100 fights and wasn't afraid of 100 more. This is a family matter, the man said, forcing a smile that didn't reach his eyes. She's upset because her mother just passed. I'm her stepfather. I have custody. Clay looked down at the girl. She was shaking, tears streaking her face, but her eyes were sharp. Terrified, yes, but not confused, not lying. That true? Clay asked her. No, she whispered. My mom's sick. She's in the hospital in Helena. He came to our house yesterday and said he was taking me to see her, but we've been driving the wrong way. I saw the signs. The man's jaw tightened. She's confused. Grief does that to kids. I have the paperwork in the van if you need to see it. Clay didn't move. Then show me. For a moment, the man just stared at him. Then he sighed, like this was all a big inconvenience, and let go of the girl's wrist. Fine, it's in the glove box. He turned toward the van. Clay stepped between him and the girl. The man stopped. What are you doing? She stays here, Clay said. You get the paperwork, you bring it back. Simple. The man's smile vanished. You have no authority here. Neither do you, Clay said, until I see something that says otherwise. For 5 seconds, the world was just wind and distant engine hum, and 2 men staring at each other across a line neither wanted to cross first. Then the man's hand moved, not toward the van, but toward his pocket. Clay's instinct was faster. He grabbed the man's wrist mid-reach and twisted, just enough to stop the motion. The man gasped, tried to pull back, but Clay's grip was iron. Slowly, Clay said. The man's other hand came up, palm open. Okay, it's just my phone. I'm calling my lawyer. Clay let go, but stayed close. The man pulled out his phone, hands shaking now, and dialed. He put it to his ear. Yeah, I need you to... Yes, I know. There's a situation. While he talked, Clay glanced down at the girl. She was staring up at him like he was the first person in days who'd looked at her like she was human. What's your name? Clay asked quietly. Emma, she whispered. Emma, I need you to stay right behind me. Don't move, understand? She nodded. The man hung up. My lawyer's calling the county sheriff. They'll confirm everything. You're interfering with lawful custody. Then we wait, Clay said. The man's expression shifted, frustration bleeding into something colder. You're making a mistake. Clay didn't answer. He just stood there, the girl behind him, the sun sinking lower, and the feeling in his gut that told him he'd just stepped into something far deeper than a custody dispute. Because 15 years ago, he'd ignored his instincts once. He'd let someone convince him everything was fine, and his daughter had paid the price. Not again. Not ever again. 20 minutes later, a sheriff's cruiser pulled into the lot, lights off, moving slow. The deputy who stepped out was young, mid-30s, clean uniform, the kind of cop who still believed the system worked if you followed procedure. His nameplate read Hollis. Somebody want to tell me what's going on? Hollis asked, hand resting on his belt, eyes moving between Clay and the man in khakis. The man stepped forward immediately. Officer, thank God. This man assaulted me and is preventing me from taking my stepdaughter home. I have full custody. Her mother just passed, and she's emotionally unstable. Hollis looked at Clay. That true? She says he's not her stepfather, Clay said. Says her mother's alive in a hospital in Helena. Says he's been driving her the wrong direction for 2 days. Hollis frowned, then turned to Emma. Sweetheart, is your mother alive? Emma nodded, tears welling again. She has cancer. She's at St. Peter's Hospital. She told me never to go with strangers. The man sighed, pulling a folder from the van. Here, court order granting me emergency custody, signed by Judge Whitaker in Cascade County. The mother is terminal. She signed over guardianship last month because she knew she wouldn't make it. Hollis took the papers, flipping through them. Clay watched his face, neutral, professional, but there was a flicker of something. Doubt, maybe. Or just the exhaustion of a man who'd seen too many messy custody battles. These look legitimate, Hollis said slowly. They're fake, Emma said, voice rising. My mom never signed anything. She told me she'd never let him take me. Kids say that all the time during custody transitions, the man said smoothly. It's normal resistance. Hollis looked at Clay. Sir, I'm going to need you to step back. This is a legal matter. Clay didn't move. Call the hospital. Verify the mother's condition and whether she signed custody over. I don't need you telling me how to do my job. Then do it. Hollis's jaw tightened. Step back. Clay held his ground for another 3 seconds, then took 1 step to the side. Not back, to the side. Still close enough to matter, Hollis pulled out his radio and walked toward his cruiser, speaking low. The man in khakis smiled faintly, adjusting his collar. You're only making this harder on her, he said quietly to Clay. Clay ignored him, crouching down to Emma's level. Did your mom ever mention this man before? Emma shook her head. He came to our house with another man. They said they were from social services. My mom was too sick to come to the door. I told them to leave, but they said they had a court order. They took me that night. What hospital is your mom in? St. Peter's, room 314. Her name is Linda Hartley. Clay memorized it. Hollis came back, face grim. Hospital confirms there's a Linda Hartley in oncology, stage 4. She's listed as stable but non-responsive. Non-responsive? Emma's voice broke. She was talking to me 3 days ago. Medical conditions change fast, sweetheart, Hollis said, not unkindly. I'm sorry, but the paperwork checks out. I have to let him take you. No, Emma said. No, please. The man reached for her arm. Clay's hand shot out, gripping the man's wrist again. One more thing, Clay said, looking at Hollis. If this is legitimate, why didn't he just show the papers when I first asked? Why'd he reach for his pocket like he was going for something else? He was calling his lawyer, Hollis said. You saw that. After I stopped him. Hollis exhaled through his nose. Sir, I'm giving you one last warning. Interfere again, and I'll arrest you for obstruction. Clay stared at him for a long moment. Then he let go of the man's wrist and stepped back. The man took Emma's arm, gentler now, aware of the audience, and guided her toward the van. She looked back at Clay, eyes wide, pleading, and Clay saw his daughter's face, 13 years old, the last time he'd seen her alive, telling him something was wrong, and him not listening. His hand went to his pocket. He pulled out his phone and did something he hadn't done in 15 years. He opened his contacts, scrolled past names he'd avoided for over a decade, and stopped on one. Rattler. He pressed call. It rang twice. Clay? The voice was rough, surprised. That you? Yeah, Clay said quietly, watching the van's door slide shut. I need the crew. There was a pause. Then, when? Now. Another pause. Longer this time. Then Rattler's voice came back harder. Where? Clay gave him the address of the gas station. We'll be there by dawn, Rattler said. What are we riding into? Clay watched the van pull out of the lot, Emma's face pressed against the tinted window. A promise I should have kept a long time ago, Clay said. Then he hung up and walked back to his bike. Hollis called after him. Where are you going? Clay didn't answer. He just started the engine, the growl echoing across the empty lot, and pulled onto the highway, following the white van, because some promises didn't care about paperwork. Clay kept 3 cars between him and the white van, staying far enough back that the man wouldn't notice him, but close enough not to lose him when the highway split. The sun had dropped below the ridgeline now, painting the sky in shades of burnt orange and deep violet, the kind of dusk that made everything look like a memory you couldn't quite trust. The van took Route 87 north, away from Helena, away from the hospital, where Emma's mother was supposedly dying. That alone was enough to confirm what Clay's gut had been screaming since the gas station. This wasn't custody. This was something else. His phone buzzed in his jacket pocket. He pulled over onto the shoulder, keeping the van's taillights in sight, and answered. "Clay." Rattler's voice was steady, but there was an edge to it, the sound of a man who'd been woken from a life he thought was over. "I made calls. We got 37 confirmed so far, more coming in. What's the play?" Clay exhaled. 37. In less than an hour. Brothers he hadn't spoken to in 15 years, and they were already gearing up. That was the thing about the Iron Oath. You could leave the club, but the code never left you. "There's a girl," Clay said, 11 years old. Man took her from her dying mother using fake custody papers. Sheriff bought it. I'm tailing him now on Route 87, heading north out of Milton's Corner. "Fake papers that fooled a cop?" Rattler's tone sharpened. "That's not amateur hour." "No, it's not. You think it's trafficking." Clay watched the van's brake lights flare as it slowed for a turn. "I think it's someone who's done this before, someone with connections." Rattler was quiet for a moment. Then, "Where do you need us?" "I'll follow him to wherever he's taking her. Once I have a location, I'll send coordinates. Don't come in hot. We do this smart. I need intel first." "Smart." Rattler's laugh was short and humorless. "You remember who you're talking to. That's why I called you first." Another pause. Then Rattler's voice softened, just slightly. "We thought you were dead, brother, when you didn't answer after the funeral. We thought you'd—" "I wasn't dead," Clay said. "Just gone. Well, you're back now, and we're with you, all of us." Clay's throat tightened. He nodded, even though Rattler couldn't see him. "I'll send the coordinates in 2 hours. Tell everyone to stay off their phones after that. If this man has the kind of pull I think he does, they'll be monitoring." "Copy that. Ride safe, brother." The line went dead. Clay pocketed the phone and kicked the bike back to life, merging onto the highway. The van was a quarter-mile ahead now, taillights blinking like dying stars. He thought about Emma's face, the way she'd looked at him when the deputy forced her into that van. The same way his daughter had looked at him the night before she disappeared, trying to tell him something without words, hoping he'd understand. He hadn't understood then, but he understood now. Watching from the United States? Drop a comment and let us know what state you're in, and don't forget to subscribe for the next chapter. The van turned off the highway onto a gravel road, unmarked, cutting through dense forest. Clay killed his headlight and followed at a distance, navigating by the faint glow of the moon and the memory of too many night rides through hostile territory. The road twisted, climbed, then leveled out into a clearing where a cabin sat dark against the trees. Not a cabin, a compound. 3 buildings, solar panels on the roofs, security cameras on the corners, a chain-link fence with razor wire, gate open, but clearly functional. The van pulled up to the main building. The man got out, walked around, and opened the side door. Emma climbed out slowly, looking around like a prisoner assessing her cell. The man put a hand on her shoulder, not rough but firm, and guided her inside. Clay stayed on the tree line, 200 yards out, watching. Lights came on inside the main building. Shadows moved past the windows. 2 men. No, 3. This wasn't a halfway house or a foster situation. This was organized. Clay pulled out his phone and took photos of the buildings, the gate, the license plate on the van. Then he backed his bike deeper into the trees and sent the coordinates to Rattler, along with the photos. The reply came in 30 seconds. 97 confirmed. ETA 4:47 a.m. 97. Clay stared at the number. Almost 100 men, dropping everything, riding through the night, because one of their own had called. He thought about Emma inside that building, about how scared she must be, about how many other kids might have been brought here before her, about how the system, the cops, the judges, the social workers, had all looked the other way because the paperwork said everything was fine, but paperwork lied. Documents could be forged. Authority could be bought. A promise, though. A promise between brothers who'd bled together, fought together, lost together. That was something no court could touch. Clay leaned back against a tree and watched the cabin, counting the hours until dawn, counting the seconds until the sound of 97 engines would shatter the silence and make it very clear that some fights didn't care about jurisdiction. The temperature dropped fast once the sun was gone. Clay pulled his collar up and settled into the crouch he'd learned overseas. Weight on the balls of his feet, spine straight, breathing slow. A position you could hold for hours without cramping, without losing focus. He'd spent 3 tours in places where falling asleep meant dying, and the muscle memory hadn't faded even after 15 years of trying to forget. The cabin stayed lit until midnight. Shadows moved across the windows. 3 distinct figures, sometimes together, sometimes apart. No sign of Emma. Clay assumed they'd put her in one of the back rooms, away from the windows, away from anyone who might be watching. Smart, careful, professional. That was the part that made his jaw tighten. This wasn't some desperate addict snatching a kid for ransom. This was a system, a machine. And machines like this didn't run without fuel. Money, connections, people in power who made sure no one looked too close. At 12:47 a.m., a second vehicle arrived. A black SUV, windows tinted, no front plate. It parked next to the van, and a woman stepped out. Mid-50s, grey hair pulled into a tight bun, wearing a blazer despite the hour. She carried a briefcase. The man from the gas station met her at the door. They talked for 2 minutes, too quiet for Clay to hear. Then went inside together. Clay took more photos. At 1:15 a.m., his phone buzzed. A text from Rattler. 68 bikes rolling. Rest meeting us at waypoint. How's it look? Clay typed back. 3 hostiles confirmed, maybe 4. 1 new arrival. Female, 50s, professional. Looks like a lawyer or social worker. No movement on the girl. Rattler. We go in hard. Clay. No, we go in loud. I want them scared, not dead. This ends with confessions, not body bags. Rattler. Copy. See you at dawn. Clay pocketed the phone and shifted his weight. His knees ached. His back ached. Everything ached. 15 years of running from himself had left him in worse shape than 3 tours of combat ever did. But none of that mattered right now. At 2:30 a.m., the lights in the cabin went out. Clay waited another 20 minutes, then moved closer, keeping to the shadows, boots silent on pine needles. He circled the perimeter, counting cameras, noting blind spots, mapping exits. 4 cameras, 2 on the main building, 1 on each of the smaller structures, all wired, not wireless. Hard to hack, but easy to cut if you knew where the junction box was. He found it behind the generator shed, a grey metal box with a padlock that looked serious but wasn't. Clay pulled a small tension wrench from his jacket and had it open in under a minute. Inside, the wiring was clean, labelled, Power Data Security. He didn't cut anything, not yet, but he memorized the layout. Because when the time came, he wanted every camera dark. At 4:00 a.m., the first sound of engines reached him. Faint, distant, like thunder rolling in from another county. Clay climbed back to his original position and waited. The sound grew, not gradually, but in waves. First 10 bikes, then 20, then 50. By 4:47 a.m., the clearing on the far side of the access road was filled with motorcycles, their engines idling low, headlights off. 97 riders, all wearing cuts, all standing beside their bikes in silence. Clay walked out of the trees and into the clearing. Rattler was at the front, tall, broad-shouldered, grey beard braided down his chest, eyes like flint. He looked older than Clay remembered, but no softer. "Brother," Rattler said, clasping Clay's hand hard enough to hurt. "Been too long." "Yeah," Clay said. "It has." The other riders moved closer, forming a semicircle. Clay recognized some of them. Wrench, Knuckles, Deacon, Ironhide, men he'd ridden with before his life fell apart, men he'd abandoned without explanation. None of them looked angry, just ready. "What's the plan?" Wrench asked. He was shorter than the others, wiry, with burn scars running up his left arm from a meth lab raid gone wrong. "We storming the place, or what?" "Not storming," Clay said. "Surrounding. I want every exit covered. I want them to wake up and see 100 bikes outside their fence and realize they're not getting out of this." "And if they call the cops?" Deacon asked. "Let them," Clay said. "We're not breaking any laws. We're just standing on public land, making noise. But when the cops show up, I want them to see what we found inside that cabin. I want them to have to explain why a little girl was taken from her dying mother and brought here with fake documents." Rattler grinned. "You want to make this their problem?" "Exactly." Knuckles, a man with a shaved head and knuckles that looked like they'd been rebuilt with steel, stepped forward. "What if they try to run with the girl before the cops arrive?" Clay's expression went cold. "Then we stop them, non-lethal, but we stop them." There was a murmur of agreement. Rattler checked his watch. "Sun's up in 43 minutes. We move on your signal." Clay nodded. "Positions in 30. I'm cutting their cameras first. When you hear the engines start, that's the signal." The riders dispersed, moving quietly through the trees, surrounding the compound from all sides. Clay watched them go, feeling something he hadn't felt in 15 years. Purpose. He walked back to the generator shed, opened the junction box, and pulled the wire cutters from his jacket. At 5:29 a.m., with the first grey light bleeding into the sky, he cut the security line. The cameras went dark, and then, in the silence that followed, Clay pressed the ignition button on his bike. The engine roared, and 96 others answered. The noise was biblical. 97 engines, all roaring to life at once, shattered the pre-dawn silence like a hammer through glass. The sound rolled across the clearing, through the trees, and slammed into the compound with the weight of a freight train. Birds exploded from the canopy. The ground itself seemed to vibrate. Inside the main building, lights snapped on. Clay sat on his bike at the head of the line, directly in front of the gate, engine idling now, eyes fixed on the door. Behind him, the other riders formed a crescent, not aggressive, not advancing, just there, a wall of leather, chrome, and iron will. The door to the cabin opened. The man from the gas station stepped out, still in his khakis, but his hair was messed now, his face pale. He stared at the bikes, at the riders, at the sheer number of them, and his hand moved instinctively toward his pocket. Clay revved his engine once, a warning. The man froze. Rattler pulled up beside Clay, cutting his engine. "You want to talk? Or you want me to?" "I'll talk," Clay said. He swung off his bike and walked to the gate, stopping just outside the chain link, close enough to be heard, close enough to be a problem. "Where's the girl?" Clay called. The man's jaw worked. He glanced back at the cabin, then at Clay, then at the riders, calculating, trying to figure out if this was something he could bluff his way through. "This is private property," the man said, voice shaking. "You're trespassing." "We're on the access road," Clay said. "Public land. We're just out for a morning ride. Coincidence we ended up here." "Bullshit." Clay smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "Where's the girl?" "I don't know what you're talking about." "Emma Hartley, 11 years old, dark hair. You took her from a gas station yesterday, claiming you had custody." Funny thing, though, I called St. Peter's Hospital, talked to a nurse. Linda Hartley never signed over guardianship. In fact, she told the nurses that if anyone tried to take her daughter, they should call the police. The man's face went grey. So I'm asking again, Clay said, quieter now. Where is she? The door opened wider. The woman with the briefcase stepped out, adjusting her blazer, like this was a business meeting. Gentlemen, she said, voice clipped and professional. I'm Margaret Winslow, legal counsel for the Bright Futures Foundation. The child in question is here under a valid court order. If you have concerns, you're welcome to file a complaint with the county, but this harassment needs to stop. Clay looked at her for a long moment. Then he pulled out his phone, swiped through his photos, and held it up so she could see. That your signature? He asked. The photo was a scan of the custody document the man had shown Deputy Hollis. At the bottom, a signature, Judge P. Whitaker. Winslow's expression didn't change. Yes, that's the judge's signature. Funny thing, Clay said. I called the Cascade County Courthouse this morning, talked to a clerk. Judge Whitaker died 6 months ago. The silence that followed was absolute. Winslow's face twitched. Just a fraction. Just enough. Clay stepped closer to the gate. You forged a dead judge's signature to steal a little girl from her dying mother, and you've probably done it before. How many, Margaret? How many kids have you taken? This is slander, Winslow said, but her voice was thinner now. I'm calling the police. Good, Clay said. Call them. I want them here. I want them to see what you've been doing. Winslow pulled out her phone. Behind Clay, Wrench's voice rang out loud and clear. We're live streaming this, by the way. 12,000 viewers and counting. Clay glanced back. Wrench was holding up his phone, camera pointed at the cabin. Other riders were doing the same. A dozen phones, all recording, all broadcasting. Winslow's hand froze halfway to her ear. You can call the cops, Clay said, but the whole internet's watching now. And once this goes viral, every case you've ever touched is going to get reopened. Every document you've ever filed is going to get audited. Every kid you've ever placed is going to get checked on. Winslow's face went white. The man in khakis took a step back toward the cabin. Margaret, we need to— Shut up, Derek, she hissed. Clay's eyes narrowed. Derek, now he had a name. Last chance, Clay said. Bring Emma out here, right now, or I let my brothers come inside and find her themselves. You can't do that, Winslow said. You have no legal authority. Neither do you, Clay said. Not anymore. For 5 seconds, no one moved. Then, from inside the cabin, a small voice. I'm here! I'm in here! Emma. Clay's heart slammed against his ribs. Derek bolted for the door. Clay was faster. He vaulted the gate, boots hitting gravel, and tackled Derek before he reached the handle. They went down hard, Derek thrashing, Clay pinning him with a knee to the spine. Don't move, Clay growled. Rattler and 3 others were over the fence in seconds, surrounding Winslow. She didn't run. She just stood there, briefcase clutched to her chest, realizing too late that she'd lost. Clay pushed off Derek, leaving Knuckles to hold him, and kicked the cabin door open. The inside of the cabin smelled like stale coffee and printer ink. The front room was an office, desks, filing cabinets, a wall covered in corkboard with photos and documents pinned in neat rows. Clay's eyes scanned them as he moved deeper inside. Photos of children, dozens of them. Some smiling, some scared, all of them with paperwork clipped beside their pictures. A system, a pipeline. His stomach turned. Emma, he called. Here! Her voice came from a hallway to the left. Clay moved fast, boots echoing on hardwood, and found a locked door at the end of the hall. He didn't bother with the knob, just kicked it once, hard, and the frame splintered. Emma was inside, sitting on a narrow bed, hands clutching a blanket. Her eyes went wide when she saw him, then flooded with tears. You came back, she whispered. Clay crouched down in front of her, making himself smaller, less overwhelming. "Yeah, I came back. Are you hurt?" She shook her head. "They didn't hurt me. They kept saying my mom was dead. They kept saying I had to forget about her." Clay's jaw tightened. "Your mom's alive, Emma. I called the hospital. She's stable, and we're going to get you back to her." Emma launched herself forward, wrapping her arms around his neck, sobbing into his shoulder. Clay held her, one hand on her back, feeling the weight of every promise he'd ever broken and every one he was about to keep. "It's okay," he said quietly. "You're safe now." Behind him, Rattler appeared in the doorway. "Cops are 2 minutes out. We got everything on camera. The forged documents, Winslow admitting to the Foundation, all of it. This is over." Clay nodded, still holding Emma. "Get her out of here. Take her to the hospital in Helena. I'll meet you there." Rattler stepped forward, kneeling beside Emma. "Hey, kiddo. My name's Rattler. I know I look scary, but I promise I'm one of the good guys. You want to go see your mom?" Emma pulled back, wiping her eyes. "Really? Really?" Rattler said. "We got 97 bikes out there. You get to pick which one you ride on." Emma's face broke into the first real smile Clay had seen from her. "Can I ride with him?" She pointed at Clay. Clay's throat tightened. He nodded. "Yeah, you can ride with me." If you're enjoying this story, please hit the like button and share it with someone who needs to hear it. They walked out of the cabin together, Emma holding Clay's hand. Outside, the clearing was chaos. Police cruisers, lights flashing, deputies moving through the crowd of bikers, taking statements. Winslow and Derek were in cuffs, being loaded into separate cars. Deputy Hollis stood near the gate, looking shell-shocked. When he saw Clay, he walked over, face grim. "I owe you an apology," Hollis said. Clay didn't answer, just looked at him. "I should have dug deeper," Hollis continued. "I should have checked the hospital myself. The paperwork looked real." "It was designed to," Clay said. "That's how they got away with it for so long." Hollis nodded slowly. Then he looked at Emma. "Your mum's awake. The hospital called. She's asking for you." Emma's face lit up. Clay looked at Rattler. "Let's ride." They mounted up. Emma sitting in front of Clay, his arms around her, keeping her steady. The other riders formed a convoy, engines rumbling low, and together they rolled out of the clearing, leaving the compound and its secrets behind. The ride to Helena took 2 hours, 97 bikes moving in formation, escort lights flashing, drawing stares from every car they passed. People pulled over to watch. Some took photos, some saluted. By the time they reached St. Peter's Hospital, the sun was high and bright, and the parking lot was full of news vans. Clay pulled up to the entrance and helped Emma off the bike. She looked up at him, eyes shining. "Thank you," she said. Clay knelt down. "You don't ever have to thank me, Emma. You were brave. You fought for yourself. That's what saved you." "But you listened," she said. "No one else listened." Clay's chest ached. "Yeah, I listened." Emma hugged him one more time, then ran inside, nurses meeting her at the door. Clay stood there watching her go, feeling something shift inside him, something that had been broken for 15 years, starting to heal. Rattler walked up beside him. "You did good, brother." Clay nodded. "We all did." "So what now?" Rattler asked. "You sticking around, or you going back to disappearing?" Clay looked at the row of bikes, at the men standing beside them, at the world that suddenly felt a little less empty. "I think," Clay said slowly, "I'm done disappearing." Rattler grinned. "Good, because we got a lot of catching up to do." And for the first time in 15 years, Clay Mercer smiled. Clay stood in the hospital lobby, boots still dusty from the ride, leather-cut drawing stares from visitors and staff alike. He didn't care. He was watching the elevator doors, waiting for Emma to come back down, hoping she'd found what she needed up there in room 314. Rattler leaned against the wall beside him, arms crossed. "You planning to go up?" Not my place, Clay said. You just saved her life. I think that earns you a hello. Clay shook his head. She needs time with her mom. That's what matters. A nurse walked past, glanced at Clay, then stopped. She was older, maybe 60, with kind eyes and the weary posture of someone who'd worked too many double shifts. Her name tag read, Sharon. You're the one who brought Emma back, she said. Yeah, Clay said. Sharon's expression softened. Linda's been asking about you. She wants to thank you. She doesn't need to. I know, Sharon said, but she wants to. Room 314, third floor. Clay hesitated. Rattler nudged him. Go. The elevator ride felt longer than the 2-hour trip from the compound. Clay's hands were shaking, just slightly, just enough to notice. He hadn't been inside a hospital since the day they told him his daughter was gone. The smell alone was enough to pull him back to that moment. Antiseptic, floor wax, the metallic tang of fear. Room 314 was at the end of the hall. The door was open. Clay knocked lightly on the frame and stepped inside. Linda Hartley was sitting up in bed, tubes running from her arm to an IV stand, oxygen line across her face. She looked fragile, pale skin, hollowed cheeks, the kind of thinness that came from fighting a war inside your own body. But her eyes were sharp, clear. Emma sat beside her, holding her hand. Mr. Mercer, Linda said, voice raspy but steady. Mom, Clay said, staying near the door. I'm glad you're awake. Sharon told me what you did. Linda's eyes filled with tears. You brought my daughter back. Clay looked at Emma, then back at Linda. She fought for herself. I just made sure someone was listening. Most people wouldn't have, Linda said. Most people would have looked away. Clay didn't know how to respond to that, so he just nodded. Linda wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. The police came by earlier. They told me about the foundation, about the fake documents. They said there were dozens of other children. Yeah, Clay said quietly. There were. And now those children are going to be found, because of you. Because Emma didn't give up, Clay said. Linda smiled faintly. You're a good man, Mr. Mercer. Clay's throat tightened. He wanted to tell her he wasn't, that he was just a man trying to fix one mistake by not making another. But Emma was watching him with something close to hope, and he didn't want to ruin that. How long do you have? Clay asked, then immediately regretted the bluntness, but Linda didn't flinch. Doctors say 6 months, maybe less. The cancer's in my lungs, my liver. It's not something you come back from. I'm sorry. Don't be, Linda said. I made my peace with it. But Emma, her voice cracked. She's 11 years old. She shouldn't have to lose her mother and end up in a system that tried to sell her off like livestock. Clay looked at Emma. You have family. Someone who can take her when... Linda shook her head. No family? Emma's father died when she was 3, car accident. My parents are gone. My sister lives in California, but she's not stable. I wouldn't trust her with Emma. So what happens? Clay asked. Foster care, Linda said bitterly. If I'm lucky, she gets a good family. If I'm not... She didn't finish the sentence. Clay was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, What if there was another option? Linda frowned. What do you mean? Clay glanced at Emma, then back at Linda. I'm not saying I have all the answers, but I know people, good people, people who would make sure Emma was safe, people who would make sure she was loved. Like who? Like a family that chose each other instead of being born into it, Clay said. A brotherhood. We'd look after our own. Linda stared at him, searching his face. You're talking about bikers. I'm talking about men and women who keep their promises, Clay said, who don't look away when a kid needs help, who would die before letting someone hurt one of their own. Linda's eyes welled up again. Why would you do that? You don't even know us. Clay looked at Emma. Saw his daughter's face again, felt the weight of 15 years of regret pressing down on his chest. "Because I didn't do it the first time," he said quietly, "and I've been paying for that ever since." Linda was silent for a long time. Then she reached out and took Clay's hand. Her grip was weak, but it was there. "Promise me," she whispered. "Promise me you'll keep her safe." Clay's vision blurred. He squeezed her hand gently. "I promise." Emma looked between them, tears streaming down her face. "Mom, what's happening?" Linda pulled Emma close, kissing the top of her head. "I'm making sure you're never alone, baby. That's what's happening." Clay left the room 10 minutes later, feeling like he'd just made the most important promise of his life. And the most terrifying. Rattler was waiting by the elevator. "How'd it go?" Clay didn't answer right away, just stared at the floor, hands in his pockets. "She's dying," Clay said finally. 6 months, maybe less. And Emma has no one. Rattler's expression darkened. "Damn. I told her we'd take care of Emma," Clay said. "I told her she'd be safe with us." Rattler looked at him. "You sure about that?" "No," Clay admitted, "but I wasn't sure about this morning either, and we made it work." Rattler was quiet for a moment. Then he clapped Clay on the shoulder. "Then we'll make this work too. We'll talk to the others, set something up. She won't be alone." Clay nodded, feeling the weight of the promise settle over him like armor. Because some promises were bigger than one man. Some promises required a family, and for the first time in 15 years, Clay Mercer had one again. The meeting happened that night in the back lot of a bar called the Iron Spoke, 40 miles outside Helena. It wasn't a club bar, just a place where bikers were welcome and questions weren't asked. The owner, a man named Dutch, who'd lost his left leg in Desert Storm, kept the backlot clear for gatherings like this. 97 bikes lined the gravel. 97 men and women stood in a loose circle under the floodlights, cuts reflecting the harsh glow. Some were drinking, most weren't. This wasn't a party. This was business. Clay stood at the center with Rattler, Wrench, Knuckles, and Deacon, the core of what used to be the Iron Oath MC's leadership before everything fell apart, before Clay left, before the club fractured into smaller chapters scattered across 4 states. But tonight they were whole again. Rattler raised his hand, and the murmur of conversation died. "Most of you know why we're here," Rattler said, voice carrying across the lot. "This morning, we pulled a little girl out of a trafficking ring. Her name's Emma Hartley. She's 11 years old. Her mother's dying. And when that happens, Emma's got no one." There was a ripple of low voices. Someone swore. Someone else shook their head. "Clay made a promise to that mother," Rattler continued, nodding toward him. "He told her we'd keep Emma safe, that she'd have a family, that we'd make sure she never ended up in the system that tried to steal her in the first place." All eyes turned to Clay. He stepped forward, feeling the weight of their attention. "I know what I'm asking," Clay said. "I know it's complicated. Legal custody, background checks, lawyers, it's going to be a fight. But I also know what happens to kids who fall through the cracks. I know what happens when no one's watching." His voice cracked slightly. "I lost my daughter because I didn't pay attention, because I trusted the wrong people. I'm not letting that happen to Emma." Silence. Then Wrench spoke up. "What are we talking about here? One of us adopts her. We rotate custody. What's the play?" "I don't know yet," Clay admitted, "but I'm talking to a lawyer tomorrow, someone who specializes in alternative guardianship arrangements. There are ways to make this work, legal ways." "And if there aren't?" Knuckles asked, not hostile, just practical. "Then we make new ways," Clay said. "We've bent rules before. This time we bend them for something that matters." Deacon, a man with grey streaks in his beard and a purple heart tattooed on his forearm, stepped forward. "I'm in. My wife and I lost our son 10 years ago. Overdose. We've got an empty room and too much silence. If Emma needs a home, she's got one." A woman near the back, Raven, chapter president of the Sisters of Steel MC, raised her hand. "I've got a cousin who's a family law attorney. Pro bono work for veterans and kids. I'll make the call tonight." Another voice. "My brother runs a youth ranch in Wyoming. If she needs space, distance, somewhere to heal, we've got options." One by one they spoke up, offers of homes, resources, legal contacts, protection, not just for Emma, but for any kid who might come after her. Because if the Bright Futures Foundation had been running this operation, there were others like it. And now that the lid was off, there would be more children who needed somewhere safe to land. By the time the last person spoke, Clay's vision was blurred with tears he refused to let fall. Rattler put a hand on his shoulder. "Looks like you got your answer, brother." Clay nodded, throat too tight to speak. "One more thing," Rattler said, addressing the crowd. "This doesn't end with Emma. We're going to find every kid that foundation touched. We're going to make sure they're safe. And we're going to make sure anyone who tries this again knows that the Iron Oath is watching." The crowd erupted in agreement. Fists raised, engines revving, a sound that carried across the plains like a declaration of war. But not a war of violence, a war of protection, of promises kept, of family chosen, not by blood, but by something stronger. 3 days later, Clay sat in a lawyer's office in Helena with Linda Hartley, Emma, and Raven's cousin, a sharp-eyed woman named Patricia Lowe, who wore a blazer and motorcycle boots. Linda was in a wheelchair now, oxygen tank at her side. She'd deteriorated fast. The doctors said it would only get faster. "Here's the situation," Patricia said, laying out paperwork on her desk. "Montana law allows for designated standby guardianship. Linda can legally appoint a guardian to take effect upon her death or incapacitation. The guardian doesn't have to be family. They just have to pass a background check and demonstrate ability to care for the child." "Can it be more than one person?" Clay asked. Patricia nodded. "It can be a network, a community. We can structure it so Emma has a primary guardian, someone with legal authority, but a support system of approved caregivers. Think of it like a village model." Linda looked at Emma, then at Clay. "Who would be the primary guardian?" Clay hesitated. "Deacon and his wife, Maria. They've been vetted, clean records, stable home. And they want this." Linda's eyes filled with tears. "I want to meet them." "They're outside," Clay said. Deacon and Maria came in 10 minutes later, Deacon in his cut, Maria in jeans and a flannel shirt, both of them nervous but steady. They sat down across from Linda and Emma, and for the next hour they talked. About loss, about hope, about what it meant to be a parent to a child who'd already been through hell. By the end, Linda was crying, but she was smiling too. "Okay," she whispered. "Okay, I trust you." Patricia drew up the paperwork. Linda signed it with a shaking hand. Emma sat beside her, holding her mother's other hand, understanding in some deep way that this was goodbye. Not today, but soon. Linda Hartley died 3 months later on a cold January morning when frost covered the windows of St. Peter's Hospital and the sun rose pale and quiet over the mountains. Emma was with her when it happened. So was Clay. So were Deacon and Maria. Linda's last words were to Emma, "You are so loved, remember that, always." And then she was gone. The funeral was held on a Saturday, in a small chapel on the outskirts of Helena. The pews were packed, not with distant relatives or co-workers, but with bikers, 97 of them, all in their cuts, all standing in silence as Emma walked down the aisle behind her mother's casket. Clay stood at the back, watching. He didn't cry. He'd done enough of that in private. But his chest ached with a grief that felt both old and new. Grief for his daughter, grief for Linda, grief for every promise he'd broken and every one he was finally keeping. After the service, they rode. All of them. A convoy stretching 2 miles long, escorting Linda's ashes to a meadow she'd once told Emma about, a place where wildflowers grew in the spring and the wind sounded like music. Emma scattered the ashes herself, standing between Deacon and Maria, Clay a few steps behind. When it was done, she turned to Clay. "Thank you," she said quietly, "for keeping your promise." Clay knelt down, meeting her eyes. "I'll always keep it, Emma. Always." She hugged him, and this time Clay let the tears come. 6 months later, Emma was thriving. She lived with Deacon and Maria, attended a good school, and saw a therapist twice a week. But she also spent weekends at the clubhouse, learning to work on bikes with Wrench, baking with Raven, and riding on the back of Clay's Softail when the weather was good. She wasn't alone. She never would be. And Clay was different now, still scarred, still haunted by the past, but no longer running from it. He'd started a non-profit with Rattler and Patricia, Iron Promise, an organization dedicated to finding children in corrupt foster and custody systems and providing them with safe, vetted guardianship through community networks. In the first year, they helped 19 kids. By the second year, that number had grown to 47. The Bright Futures Foundation was dismantled. Margaret Winslow and Derek Hale were convicted on multiple counts of fraud, kidnapping, and conspiracy. 12 other operatives were arrested. The network that had stolen Emma and dozens of other children was broken. But the work wasn't over. It never would be. Because for every Emma they saved, there were more waiting. More kids screaming for help in gas stations, in parking lots, in places where people looked away. And the Iron Oath MC, along with their brothers and sisters across the country, had made a promise. They would listen. They would act. They would never look away. On a warm evening in late summer, Clay stood in Deacon's backyard, watching Emma play with Maria's dog. She was laughing, really laughing, in a way that made his chest feel both light and heavy at the same time. Rattler walked up beside him, handing him a beer. "You did good, brother." Clay took the bottle but didn't drink, just watched Emma. "We did good. You think Linda would be proud?" Clay nodded. "Yeah, I think she would." They stood there in silence for a while, the sound of Emma's laughter mixing with the distant rumble of motorcycles on the highway. "You ever think about what would have happened if you hadn't stopped that day?" Rattler asked. Clay's jaw tightened. "Every day." "But you did stop." "Yeah," Clay said quietly. "I did." Rattler clapped him on the shoulder. "That's the difference between who you were and who you are now." Clay finally took a sip of his beer, letting the words settle, because 15 years ago he'd failed to keep a promise. He'd lost his daughter because he hadn't listened, hadn't acted, hadn't been there when it mattered most. But Emma was alive. Emma was safe. Emma had a future. And that was a promise he would keep for the rest of his life, not just for her, but for every child who needed someone to hear them when they screamed, someone to stand between them and the darkness, someone to keep their word, no matter the cost. Because that's what family did. And the Iron Oath MC, 97 strong and growing, was family. Thank you so much for watching this story. If it touched your heart, please subscribe to the channel and hit the notification bell so you never miss another story of courage, redemption, and promises kept. Share this with someone who needs to hear it. And remember, sometimes the most important thing you can do is listen when someone asks for help. See you in the next one. Ride safe.